The other conversations that took place was between Wang Yi and Sergei Lavrov. And as you
Yes,
pointed out, there were questions apparently with Indian representatives as Putin's going to be going to
yes,
India to speak with Modi on December 4th, I believe.
yes.
Um, let's go to Modi first. I'm fascinated with the Modi conversation.
Well,
There's been all sorts of talk in the West that India
yes,
isn't going to stop using Russian oil. India is that the U.S. is trying to pressure Russia to sell its oil companies. Like all of this
yes.
talk about it, effectively saying this is going to be the thing that injures Russia in regards to the war. What's the reality of this? Why is he going to have the conversation with Modi? What is the main thrust of that conversation?
Well, I was in Delhi last week and had the opportunity to meet press colleagues. I did a couple of podcasts, which our audience can look at in Delhi itself, answering questions from very competent Indian journalists and analysts. And I've also met a variety of Indian sources, all of whom raise a number of interesting questions. Uh, on the oil issue, uh, the the Indian side is going to buy oil at a price that suits the Indian economy best, and that's why it began to buy more oil in the past couple of years than it had in the past. What the Indian side sees is that when it that Trump's sanction against dealing with Rosneft and Lukoil as suppliers of crude oil is essentially unilaterally a Trump punishment for Modi, a US punishment for India, because while it's allegedly a universal sanction, Trump has already exempted Xi Jinping and the Chinese from that sanction. He's clearly said he's going to let the oil flow to China because they need it in the northern parts of the country, he said. Second, Trump isn't sanctioning Turkey for buying Russian oil and processing it and refining it and then reselling it to Europe as petroleum products. So Turkey and China are clearly exempted. Why India? Why push India? So India and the Modi government feels that it's more vulnerable to US attack than China is. It's less capable of counter-threatening. It's got a tariff, an economic tariff punishment that it needs to resolve with a trade deal, a counter-tariff trade deal that Trump will accept. And that's a lot. That's been very carefully negotiated for months, and it may succeed. But the perception on the Indian side is that there's been a serious pivot by the United States against India on oil, but that's much less problematic for the Indians than the American pivot to Pakistan. Let's remember that India has fought several wars against Pakistan, defeating them each time. The most recent was this year. Trump has made a public fantasy of his role in achieving a ceasefire with Pakistan. Pakistan was defeated. I know that there's a big audience out there that wants to see Pakistan as another Muslim victim like the Palestinians suffering from the American-Israeli genocide. This is not the case, never been the case with Pakistan. Pakistan's military has always acted under CIA guidance until this brief period of relationship with China. The war against India that was stimulated by a Pakistan-driven terrorist incident in Kashmir produced retaliation that nearly destroyed all of Pakistan's command control. So Pakistan was saved by the ceasefire arrangement that General Marshal Munir negotiated with Vance, and has solidified by a variety of economic deals, lobbying deals, and plain bribery to put the United States once again in the driving seat of all the Pakistan war-making platforms, aiming at Pakistan's western border against Iran, aiming at Afghanistan, and aiming again at India. So India understands that the US is becoming again a strategic prompter, a strategic threat behind Pakistan. So India faces a China problem about which there's violence, about which there's military engagement in the Himalayas, in the northeast. It faces in the west a US-driven Pakistan warfighting platform. It faces the potential for threat in the Indian Ocean to the south. India has a very capable and very experienced military machine, and it wants to know about Russia, its long-term strategic ally. Can we rely on you if there's another war or a conflict in our west from Pakistan and the United States? Can we rely on you if there's a clash in the northeast between our forces and the Chinese? Now, think about that strategically. It's a very serious, pressing Indian concern, and President Putin's going to be asked this question by Prime Minister Modi. Why do I know that? Because the journalists on yesterday asked Peskov. Now, I'll just read you what they asked. I'm wandering a bit away from the oil question because essentially the oil question is minor. It's subordinate to the bigger strategic question that the Indians need to ask and will ask President Putin. What the journalist said during Peskov's briefing, I'll put the links up on my Dances with Bears so that our audience can watch the questions put to Peskov.
And I'll put the article below also.
Yeah. So the journalist from India Today said, look, Mr. Peskov, we see you, Russia, have a deepening, I'm part quoting the words, deepening no limits partnership with China. He says, this is exactly the question. Can Russia give an undertaking in private or in public that in a crisis between China and India, Russia would not tilt decisively towards Beijing? That was the question. And believe it or not, Peskov didn't know how to answer it, wasn't prepared. Now, that's
a difficult question, by the way. I'm sorry to interrupt. That is a very difficult question, especially with the relationship between Russia and China.
You're right. And in my week in Delhi, the question came up in many ways. And I was asked the same question, but I won't bore you with my answer. Let me tell you how Peskov, speaking for President Putin, introducing the visit card, so to speak, to the Indian press before Putin arrives on Thursday, how he answered. Well, he answered all over the place. We enjoy a very high level of cooperation with China, he says. I'm quoting, the same stand we have with India. We are ready to go as far as India is ready. Excuse me, what's that mean? What does that mean in answer to the question? Are you willing to give us the undertaking you won't side with our enemy if we are at war with China? That isn't to say India wants a war with China. They don't. China is one of the largest trading partners with India. There are multiplying opportunities right now because China has lost its position in Pakistan, been replaced by the United States, and there is a strategic opportunity for India and China to bury the hatchet. Okay, we don't need to go down that path unless there are folks out there who want to say that I'm I'm wrong about Pakistan. I'm wrong about the war and so on and so on. Fine, we can have that discussion another time. Right now, the issue from an Indian point of view was asked of the Russian side, will you give us an undertaking that you will not tilt decisively towards China? And so what happened is that Mr. Peskov, who had every opportunity to anticipate this question, failed to answer it. He says, the same stand with India. We are ready to go as far as India is ready. Well, he's referring to the defense relationship between India and Russia. India and Russia will be discussing whether the Indian Air Force will be equipped with Sukhoi 57s, the latest Russian multi-role fighter that the Russian side has been offering to sell with technology transfer and so forth to the Indian Air Force. At the same time, the French are bidding to sell other aircraft, and both sides, and there are other bidders in this race too, are willing to offer price discounts, technology transfer, local production offsets, all that stuff. In addition, India is negotiating to receive the top-line S-500 anti-aircraft missile defenses. And the scope, depth, significance of Indian-Russian military defense cooperation is long-standing, many, many years. It's based on mutual understandings, training, cooperation, coordination. It's not a flash in the pan. It's not currently, it's not brand new. But for Peskov to say we are ready to go as far as India is ready implies that India should buy more Russian and and therefore buy, as it were, an insurance policy that Russia should not tilt decisively towards China. It sounds a bit Trump-like, doesn't it?
It's a hard question to answer. I mean, like, the relationship between China and Russia at this point, especially in the context of the war, has been very close, especially in the context of China, let's say, purchasing Russian oil and those type of things.
True.
To turn around and answer that question with a flat yes or no alienates the other country. It's a difficult question.
Right. And that's why, great cue, Jamal. You just cued me to talk about the meetings that Wang Yi had in Moscow, also yesterday, because there's some very strange things seem to have occurred. Let me finish on the Indian side for any Indians in our audience by saying that Peskov did, by a display of hands and pieces of paper on his desk, mean to say that China is a strategic partner of Russia, India is a strategic partner of Russia, both China and India, ancient civilizations, old countries. We look forward, he said, to their achieving more cooperation strategically, and we will try to strike a balance between them. But he did it in such a ham-handed, ham-fisted way, he would have left the Indian side thinking, to that serious question, he wasn't ready to give a serious answer. And that's a serious deficit if you're trying to introduce your president to your prime minister to discuss that very problem. So what do we conclude? How can the Russian side be so unready to answer that big question for India the day before President Putin arrives? How can they be that clumsy? Is that the correct interpretation of Peskov's press conference with the Indians yesterday? Well, we can argue pros and cons, but it wasn't a performance generating trust and confidence. And that was the question. Now let's look at what happened when Wang Yi goes to Moscow yesterday. Again, mass media haven't reported this much. This is running in parallel with the Americans. Why are our alt media and podcasters so preoccupied with the United States they don't understand or follow that Russia has strategic relations with China on the deck yesterday, strategic relations with India on the deck yesterday? What are we as podcasters? Are we also hegemonic about the United States? Is that the only country in the world that should count?
I would say I brought this up yesterday. I had an Asian guest yesterday, and I asked very specifically, why is Wang Yi meeting with Lavrov at the exact same time that Wickoff is meeting with Peskov? So I would like to give myself some flowers on this. I did bring this up.
No. I think all credit to you, Jamal, because you're doing what the others don't do. As we said, where's the ex-CIA man and the ex-MI6 man who are supposed to understand how all these bits and pieces work together? Well, nowhere to be seen. They allow themselves to be US-centric, American-centric, as if the world is focused only on the boy Jared and Mr. Witkoff. That wasn't all that was happening in Moscow yesterday. Okay, so what we have is a very strange combination of Russian reports. Is Wang Yi went first to the Security Council, chaired by Sergei Shoigu and ex-president Dmitry Medvedev. And the Chinese issued a readout of that meeting. The Russians didn't. I'm looking at a side so I can read it. The readout appears in the South China Morning Post and some other places. And the emphasis Wang Yi gives in the readout are, quote, China and Russia have reached a high degree of strategic consensus on issues related to Japan and jointly oppose the revival of Japanese militarism. Wang and Shoigu had comprehensive and in-depth exchanges on major issues concerning the strategic security interests of both countries and concluded their talks with mutual trust strengthened. Quotes, the two sides conducted strategic alignment on issues related to Japan, reaching a high degree of consensus. They agreed to resolutely uphold the outcomes of World War II victory, firmly oppose any attempts to whitewash colonial aggression, and resolutely counter any attempts to revive fascism or Japanese militarism. Nothing there about the Ukraine war. Niche or nothing about the Ukraine war, which is a Russian priority. Yes, the Russians are very concerned with Japanese militarism, the revival of the Japanese. They're breaking the end of war settlement that capped their self-defense force. They're becoming a spearhead, a war-fighting platform for the United States against Russia and China. Yes, Japan is a priority for China and Russia, but that's all the conversation that was recorded in Minister Wang's morning work. So let's see. In the afternoon, he drives over to the foreign ministry to meet Minister Lavrov. There's no mention of Japan in the foreign ministry's public account of what they were talking about. That's a bit odd. It's not very far from the Security Council offices of the foreign ministry in Moscow, but it's like a strategic world change between the two places. So let's hear what Lavrov had to say, if you don't mind. Listen to this. This is remarks prepared by the foreign minister of Russia receiving the foreign minister of the strategic ally China. Quotes, I hope that today's meeting will offer us an opportunity to have a trust-based conversation. This is the way friends must communicate, to go over all these matters and outline specific steps for moving forward toward fulfilling our leaders' agreements. Well, I don't know about you, but it sounds pretty defensive to me. Unusually defensive. Is it possible, you might ask, that there are stumbling blocks, disagreements between the two powers, problems of, I don't know, conflicting intention, conflicting action? If so, on what issues? Why would you say I hope that today's meeting will give us an opportunity to have a trust-based conversation.
That is weird.
Isn't that what they already do? Isn't that
Yeah.
what the strategic partnership agreement requires them to have? Didn't Wang Yi say to tell Shoigu, we trust each other? So he drives a couple of kilometers across Moscow, and Lavrov isn't so sure. Okay, that's what Lavrov says. Okay,
That is a very strange statement. Yeah.
Right. That's our evidence. This is a podcast, Jamal, in which we talk evidence, facts. Nobody wants to know my opinion. It's worthless. This is just the facts, ma'am. That was the famous old Los Angeles detective show, remember? Anyway, here's the facts. Here's more of the facts. The communique issued by the Russian Foreign Ministry after the Wang Yi meeting. I'll just read a bit of it. On December 2, Foreign Minister Lavrov held talks with Foreign Minister Wang Yi in Moscow. Wang Yi came to Moscow to take part in conjunction with Security Council Secretary Sergei Shoigu, the 20th round of Russian-Chinese consultations on strategic security. Now, the punchlines. Special emphasis was placed on prospects for resolving the Ukraine crisis based on eliminating the root cause of the conflict and proper consideration of the fundamental interests of the Russian Federation, the situation in the Asia-Pacific region, and other matters of mutual interest. Following the talks, the sides noted, now listen to this, overlapping or close positions on all key bilateral and international issues, which fact serves as foundation for stable, positive dynamics of Russia-China strategic partnership, regardless of the complex geopolitical environment. Now, you don't have to be a literary analyst that gets a PhD in analyzing language to understand that that overlapping or close don't mean identical. They imply disagreement. There are significant points on which the Russians can't get the Chinese to agree. Well, that's a news item, wouldn't you say? So, where are we now?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm just telling you the facts. What appears to have happened is that Lavrov and Shoigu, representing Russian policy at the top, have differences with China, which they don't want to disclose, that relate to strategic security, the war in the Ukraine, and China's concerns for its strategic security in the buildup of the US in Japan, Philippines, Taiwan Straits, and so on. What are the differences? I would say, at the very least, this presentation shows there are significant differences on strategic warfighting issues between China and Russia, which the Indian side will be interested to ask Putin to explain. So we're announcing ahead of Putin's visit that our Indian colleagues might pursue this. That's one part. Second, we understand the Indians, when they ask the question, that down in Delhi, down meaning in the south, they think in the north, Russia and China are tilting against India, that Russia favors China. No, China. Trump favors China over India. That's what's happening. But the Indians would like to know, and Mr. Peskov wasn't able to say something convincing or specific or concrete on that issue. Where does this all add up to? Russia couldn't agree with the United States. Russia couldn't agree with China. And Russia couldn't agree with India all in one day. How about that, Jamal? How about that?
Oh, what a complicated mix of relationships.
Isn't it?
And by the way, that flies in the face of the way people think about it. People think China and Russia are like a one-to-one, um, in the way they think about their geopolitical standing. And I suppose that's not entirely true based on these dialogues. Wow.
Well, they may be right. All they got to do is do better at the evidence than I've just tried to be. I'm happy to be proved wrong. All the folks have got to do is give us better evidence than what we just laid out. That's all.
Well, they clearly don't want to air their differences, but it's
Fair enough.
strange that they're noting that there are differences, even though they don't want to air their differences. It's interesting. Wow.
Well, from a drafting point of view, let's just suppose that we're all in the keeping secrets business. Wouldn't you say that Mr. Ushakov has done a clearer job of revealing the issues dividing the US side from the Russian side on the current war?
Yes.
Than Mr. Lavrov and Mr. Wang have shown in relation to what China and Russia disagree about on strategic security, and
Yes.
a better job than Mr. Peskov has done in answer to the Indian question. Wouldn't you say that if we just looked at the performances, Ushakov, speaking for Putin, has made it clearer what the differences are? Of course, we've amplified it, and we've got the help of, all of these plans that have surfaced in the Western press. And we've got dozens of us podcasters and analysts on all sides adding evidence to the mix. So I guess we've got help. But we aren't American-centric. You're a US citizen. I'm a US citizen. But we aren't American-centric when we look at the world. Otherwise, we'll all be Mearsheimer students.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
So we're not. What we have to understand is from a non-hegemonic position, Russia's relations with each of those three big states in one day show very different pattern of behavior than we think, than we are accustomed to listening to.
Mm-hmm. John, this has been a masterclass. Thank you for this.
Well, we're both students here, Jamal.
I fantastic breakdown. Let me just put it that way then. Fantastic breakdown. No, you've pulled this apart in a way that I guess part of me was confused when I read Ushakov's statements, which I'm glad that you were able to pull apart to kind of explain, give more context to. I didn't see the readout from the Wang Yi Lavrov meeting, so thank you for breaking that down. And I was very curious on what that conversation was going to be about between Putin and Modi. And again, a great breakdown. So you have my complete thanks for this. John Helmer, the longest continuously serving foreign correspondent in Russia, the only Western journalist to direct his own independent bureau, national and without national commercial ties. You can check him out on Dances with Bears. It is a fantastic magazine, or let's say, what would you even call that? I mean, I call it a magazine, but it's like an online.
Well, it's long read plus funny cartoons.
Yes, but your analysis on it is sublime. It is fantastic. And again, this is one of those publications that I read anytime you put out a different article on it. So I will put that at the bottom so the audience can check it out for themselves. John, you have a fantastic rest of your day, man. Thank you for this.
Thank you, Jamal. Good to be talking with you. Look forward to coming back again. Thanks.
Oh, absolutely. You're always welcome. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, John Helmer. He is amazing. If you haven't checked out Dances with Bears, check it out. It is his analysis on this stuff is just awesome. And he often puts up the interviews that he does on his website also. It is just fantastic. If you're looking for analysis, he's one of the best in